When we begin to understand biblical prophecy, what's about to happen next is going to affect the whole planet Earth. We lost our land, our culture, and our identity. There is a great awakening amongst the scattered tribes, and now we must return to the covenant of our forefathers. The Father chose out of all nations the nation of Israel. Okay, shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome again to the congregation of Yashra'al. Okay, my name is Elder Zakane Kusadabar. And first, let me do this. Let me apologize for the long delay. It's been about 3 weeks, but there's been so much I've been doing over the last 3 weeks. I did an immersion, studying. I just want to make sure that the information that I'm giving Mishpachah is exact and is as correct as possible. There's a lot that's going on, and I just don't want to do classes if I don't have all of the material that is actually needed, because once again, once this information goes out, it's out, all right? And I just want to make sure that I do the due diligence in making sure that everything is nice, correct, everything is done in decency and is proper, and as less mistakes as possible. The reason why I keep saying mistakes is because history is always changing. There's always new information out here. And I just want to make sure, once again, that the information is sound and is correct. So, like in all of the classes that I do, Mishpachah, let's start off with the Father's Prayer, all right? The Father's Prayer. And let's do it in what we know to be the Hebrew, all right? And I use that with discretion because, once again, we've lost a whole lot, all right, a whole lot. And coming into this Hebraic walk with these vowel points and how it's being told to us how to actually read the language, for me, it's becoming very questionable, all right? We have to question every single thing because, once again, the way that we're doing things, it is still, in my opinion, it is still centered around what others are telling us how is actually read, how things are actually done. But at some point, I do realize that we're going to have to really do that due diligence in studying and looking over every single thing, because so many things has changed, twisted, turned upside down. Right is left, left is right. So, Mishpachah, I just pray that you continue to walk with me on this journey, uncovering just so much that's been going on around us, Father, right? So, in Mishpachah. So just bear with us as we continue to do this walk in truth and honesty. So, once again, the Father's Prayer in Hebrew, in Hebrew, Abinu, Shabbat Shamayim, Yit Kodat Shemka, O Yit Barak Melkutka, Retsunka Yahiye Ishui. Ba Shamayim, U Ba Aretz, Ut At Ain, Lat Menu Tamedit, Umakolanu, Kata'atenu, Ka'asher Anachnu, Mukhalim, U Al Tabi Ainu Layide, Nasayon, U Sham Ranu Makal Ra. All the saints of the Father through his Son, Yahushua Ha'Mashiach, who is and was that atoning sacrifice for the nation of Israel. And now, Mishpachah, what we're going to do is that we're going to do it in English. All right, we're going to do it in English. Our Father, which art in heaven, set apart be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Father, we pray that you give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors. Father, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Father, from all that is evil. For thine is the kingdom, and all esteem belongs to the Father, through his son, Yahushua HaMashiach. We say hallelujah. So once again, Mishpachah, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule this morning to join me, Kasada, as we go over the papacy. All right, the papacy. So that's going to be the main focus for at least one more series. All right, because we're almost done with the Daniel, the 7th chapter series, and we want to talk a little bit about the history of the papacy. Now, we see that there's a lot that is going on in the world today. I've been gone for about 3 weeks studying. Like I said, I did an immersion. Well, I was attempting to do an immersion about 2 weeks ago, but a couple of things came up. But that particular immersion that I was trying to do 2 weeks ago, it should take place on next week, Thursday. All right, next week, Thursday. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted on that. And anybody that is interested in getting immersed, please reach out to me at NewStudy, STUDY, NEWHAGE at AOL.com. Once again, that's NewStudy, STUDY, NEWHAGE at AOL.com. So once again, Mr. Picard, as you see, there's been a lot that's been going on in the news, all right, with this presidential election. What's going on between China and Russia? They have joined forces? What's happening in Ukraine? So there's a lot of stuff that is happening, Mr. Picard, a lot of stuff that's happening. And it's kind of hard for me to believe those that are studying Torah, even if you was not studying Torah, we're on the brink of a major change. A major change. And I pray that we all stay girded up, realize what's going on. And it is my argument, all right? It is my argument that the only thing that's going to be able to sustain us here in these last troublous times that I believe that we're in is going to be the Torah. So making sure that we have a complete understanding of what's going on in Daniel, the 7th chapter, is going to be extremely important. And I want to continue on with the little horn, the papacy, Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel, the 7th chapter, Mishpachah, all right? What we're going to be doing here this morning is going over a lot of history, all right? More so history than anything else, because I believe that the more we know about the history and how history actually affects what is happening today, I believe is going to be very important. Because what is happening today is a direct effect of what happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and especially what happened in 538 AD. And we had talked about it a little bit 3 weeks ago, and we want to talk about it a little bit more here this morning. The importance of 1,260 days, okay, is listed as 1,260 days in Scripture, but understanding the day for a year policy that we have talked about so many times before, it is not actually 1,260 literal days, but 1,260 years. Once again, 1,260 years. And like I had did the math before, when you add the 1,260 years to the 538 CE era is when Rome made, excuse me, not Rome, but the papacy made her grand appearance. We're talking about 1779, all right? 1779. And the reason why that date of 1779 is so important is because during the time of 1779, we have a very important event that was happening around that time. And that event was called the coming in of America, where she now gets her independence from Great Britain. So making sure that we understand history is going to be essential, because we really need to be able to understand what is actually happening today. So again, I want to start off by saying, shalom to the Mishpachah. And once again, it's all about the papacy, the papacy, the papacy. All right, there's so much to say about the papacy. So much to say about the papacy. And the more I study, it becomes more apparent for me, that the little horn couldn't be any other entity than the Roman Catholic Church. From my readings, I found out that the rabbit hole is so deep that I could never do a complete and thorough investigation in a few months of presentations. I found out that the crimes of the papacy in history are so heinous. I am shocked that the religion is still flourishing today. But this can only come about when a person really begins to understand what is happening in history and how important is the papacy in history. I mean, what were some of the things that happened during the times of 538 AD, and then we have now pretty much the demise of the papacy in 1798. Well, let's read on. I would strongly suggest to any serious Bible student who has a love for Torah to look beyond the history of preterism, aka the 70 AD doctrine. Now, the reason why I talk so much about preterism and the 70 AD doctrine, for me, all right, this is just for me. Whenever someone is telling me to stop basically looking after a certain period of time, my argument is going to be, well, what is it that you're trying to hide? Or what is it that you don't want? What is it that you don't want me to see if you're pushing a 70 AD doctrine? Meaning now is that everything came to a conclusion with Israel in 70 AD. If I was to take that avenue, looking at now, or not looking at what happened after 70 AD, what happened during the transatlantic slave trade? What happened during Jim Crow? What happened as early as today? How does that now make things relevant on how I should now proceed forward in my relationship with the Father? How does that work? So again, I'm not making mockery or making fun of preterism per se. It's just that I'm real careful if anybody is telling me that everything came to a conclusion in 70 AD. Now, according to many scholars, Jesuit Luis de Alcazar, and it's important now that we follow these names and dates. So I don't want anybody to take my word for anything. But at your leisure, look at this individual who was a Jesuit scholar. His name was Luis de Alcazar. He was born in 1554, then he died around 1613. He is generally considered to be the founder of preterism. Well, Kasadabar, what does this have to do with anything? Well, what this has to do is that the Roman Catholic Church had its hands in the thinking, the idea, the teachings of Luis de Alcazar, okay, who is known generally, again, by scholars now to have started now this whole doctrine that everything came to a conclusion in 70 AD. In understanding eschatology, which are end-time events, everybody has their own type of rules on how they decipher scripture, and I do understand where they're coming from. But once again, I believe that it is very dangerous to put a stamp seal on the Bible of 70 AD. Very dangerous. Now, let's continue on. All right, let's continue on. Who is the little horn? There are key historical events in the Roman Empire after the cross of the Mashiach, commonly known as the Christ, that we need to understand to identify the little horn power. These events provide the background and the environment by which the little horn first appears and grows to prominence. And if we were to stop at 70 AD, we would never come to this understanding on what happened after 70 AD when we begin to look at that colossal figure that I have been talking about for over a year. The Babylonians, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greeks, the Romans, and then after the Romans, we have what? The iron that is mixed with clay. And just looking at, when did the little horn appear? Did the little horn appear during the time of the Babylonians? No. Did the little horn come up during the time of the Medo-Persian Empire? No. Did they come up amongst the Greeks? No. Then, and if it didn't come up amongst the Greeks, then it cannot be who? It cannot be Antiochus Epiphanes IV. It can't be. Did the little horn come up during the time of the Romans? Yes and no. Well, Kasad, how can you give an answer of yes and no? Well, the Roman Empire came into power around 168 BC, and they began to be severely dismantled around 476 AD. So from the time of 168 BC and 476 AD, the little horn never appeared. During that time now, we have the iron mixed with clay, and I talked about those 10 invading nations that invaded Rome. Did the little horn come up during that time? No. It came up after the 10 invading tribes, then came up the little horn. And that little horn is the papacy, and the little horn was not even Nero. And I want to try to make sure that that whole situation is as clear as possible. And as we move on now to the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter, which is going to be about another 2 weeks, I'm going to further explain the importance of how we need to understand what is going on with that colossal figure. Now, to identify the little horn accurately now, and with all confidence, let's be sure we know when it did not appear. See, the prophetic timeline, which we're going to talk about below, I'm going to have that now. And looking at these key reference points, to start with now, we need to know that the little horn did not appear on the lion, like I said a little bit earlier. The lion did not have a little horn. That means that the little horn power did not emerge during the time of the Babylonians, nor the geographical area of the Babylonian Empire. Likewise, we know that the little horn did not appear with the bear, which is the Medo-Persian Empire. This means that the little horn did not emerge during the time of the Medo-Persian Empire or its territories. Let's continue on. We know the leopard did not have a little horn. Okay, Alexander the Greek, during that whole era there, where we have Cassandra, Lysistrata, Seleucus, and Ptolemy, the little horn did not come up during that era. It had 4 heads, but not a little horn. Therefore, with all confidence, or confidently now, we can say that the little horn power did not appear during the Greek Empire or its territories. And lastly, the little horn does not appear on the strong beast with iron teeth. However, it does not appear until after the 10 horns. Like I said earlier, it does not appear until after the 10 horns. And so what you have here on slide number 4, everything that I have in big, bold, black letters It is there for a reason. And I pray that everybody is following along. And with everything that is going on, Mishpachah, with the assassination attempt with Donald Trump, and understanding Bible prophecy, and understanding that colossal figure is going to be extremely important. Let's move on. Okay, here we go. The prophetic timeline, Daniel the 2nd and the 7th chapter. Like I made mention earlier, Daniel the 2nd chapter makes mention of metals. All right, gold is the best metal. But notice now is that gold now gets weakened through time. In comparison to now Daniel the 7th chapter, gold, Daniel the 7th chapter said that this gold is actually the lion. Daniel the 2nd chapter talks about silver. So notice now how the this material, okay, is beginning now to depreciate in value. For gold is more expensive than silver. Bronze is more, silver is more expensive than bronze. Iron comes up next, but the bronze is more expensive than the iron. Then we have the iron mixed with clay. So in Daniel the 2nd chapter now, once again, we see how this material or this government begins to lessen in value. In Daniel 2, it talks about, again, these metals. But in Daniel the 7th chapter now, these metals now are given a name in reference to animals. In Daniel the 7th chapter, it makes mention that the gold is the lion, the silver is the bear, the bronze is the leopard, the iron is the beast, and then it talks about the iron mixed with clay. And we had talked about so many times before that beast now is a general term. All right, it's a general statement. And if you go to Second Ezra, excuse me, Second Ezra, it tells us that that beast is actually, excuse me, that beast was actually the eagle. Okay, that was actually the eagle. And I just want to read that to you right quick. This is 2nd Ezra, the 12th chapter, and I'm going to read verses 11 and 13. 2nd Ezra, the 12th chapter, verses 11 to 13. The eagle, Ezra, whom thou sawest come up from the sea, is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel. But it was not expounded unto him, therefore now I declare it unto thee. So behold, the days will come that there will rise up a kingdom upon the earth, and it shall be feared above all the kingdoms that were before it. And so, only thing that I'm sharing here, Mr. Picard, is that this beast here that was described to Daniel was simply made known to Daniel as a beast. But when you go to 2nd Ezra, the 12th chapter, verses 11 through 13, it makes mention that that beast is actually the eagle. And if you look at the back of your dollar bill, all right, it talks about, you see now Babylon, okay, and you see the pyramid, and you see the cap is actually raised above the pyramid, and it has now the all-seeing eye. So symbols are very important in helping us to understand also end-time events. And to the left of your dollar bill, on the back now, you're going to see what? The eagle. So it's amazing to me how when I talk to certain people where they say that they cannot make the connection with Rome with America. I can't see how you can't. What I'm arguing, when you begin to look at these 10 barbaric states here, and understanding that 3 of them were actually uprooted by the papacy. 3 of them was uprooted by the papacy once again. And looking at how now the European Union came out of those invading tribes. Meaning now is that there was no such thing as the United Nations now during the time of 538 AD. But if you were to trace the history of the United Nations, it goes back to those invading tribes. So let's read on. Once again, dates are going to be very important. So once again, you have Babylon that ran from 605 BC to 539 BC. Then after that, we have the Medo-Persian Empire, which represents the bear, which is described now in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. So the Medo-Persian Empire is the bear, and they ran from 539 to 331 BC. From 331 BC to 168 BC, we have the Greeks, which is represented by the leopard. 1 second, please. And then we have Rome. Rome ran from 168 BC to 476 BC. And this is known now by the Western Empire. So there was a Western Empire and there was an Eastern Empire. And we talked about before now the importance of understanding who was Diocletian. Diocletian now, he had saw that Rome had gotten so big that Rome was actually divided. It became divided now because, once again, Rome had gotten so big, but it became an Eastern and Western Rome around 329 AD. And that's when we began to talk about 3 weeks ago now with Constantine. So let's move on. So you see in the middle of that now we have 31 AD, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in our next classes, because now we have to also usher in times and dates in regards to when does now the Mashiach comes on the scene. When does the Mashiach come on the scene? Because my argument is that when you read the book of Daniel, you have to also tally in the Mashiach. And it is going to be clear when we go to the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter, where it is literally telling you, timeline-wise, that when the Mashiach is going to make his grand appearance. It's all there. Now, the 10 horns. We have the 10 horns, which comes up roughly after 476 AD or around, let me give it a safer date. The latter end of the 3rd century, they were doing this migrating into Rome, beginning to now change, not change policies, but become part of Rome, and to the point where now they become so big, they now become a problem inside of Rome. And this is where we get the era of the iron mixed with clay. And then we talked about in previous classes before, we made mention of, hold on for a second. My sister, what matter were the Assyrians of the Daniel vision? Now, that's a good question now, because remember now in 721 BC, that's when Northern Kingdom went into captivity under the Assyrians. So this timeline that Daniel was seeing was after 721 BC. So this is basically making a reference to what happened to Southern Kingdom and not Northern Kingdom. But there were stragglers of Northern Kingdom amongst Israel. But for the most part, what we have in the book of Daniel, the 2nd chapter, what we're talking about here, and the 7th chapter, is that this is basically making a reference to Southern Kingdom. Okay, so 721 BC is when Northern Kingdom went into captivity under the Assyrians. So I pray that that helps some. Okay, so then we have, Mr. McCall, like I made mention earlier, When we begin to look at this little horn and when she came into play in 538 AD, and if you were to add 1,260 years to that, you have 1798. Now we're going to talk about again the importance of that date of 1798 AD and how the European nations came into play, which we have today. So there's a lot of history, and the only thing that I can do is point the Mishpachah in the right direction. And from that point on, it would be up for you to read. That's the reason why I said at the intro of today's class is that there is so much material, so much that you'll spend years, I mean, literally years, trying to, not trying to understand, but to begin to look at so many issues and problems that the papacy is actually causing the saints even till this very day. And I said now that I'm even surprised that Catholicism is actually a religion today based upon all of the crimes, the heinous crimes that she's committed over the years. All right, so let's read on. Now, this means that the little horn appears and comes to a prominent role after Rome transitions to its successor states in 476 AD and in Europe. While the above may seem obvious, there have been many students who placed the little horn during the time of the leopard, and the leopard represents the Greeks. I believe that this is an obvious error, and there is no logic to support that conclusion. So what I want to do now, let's briefly review some key historical events leading up to the appearance and prominence of the little horn power, who I believe to be the papacy. Again, we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of dates here. And the dates that I'm giving out here this morning, it don't even scratch the surface. And I will pray that if anybody was interested in understanding how deep this rabbit hole goes with the papacy, now known to be the Roman Catholic Church, because like I said, there's a difference between the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church, but it's going to be up to that individual if you want to put that time in to understand how deep the rabbit hole really goes. So let's look at some of this Christian or saint persecutions through 313 AD. And this is very important for me. What seems to be the problem for me with the 70 AD doctrine, it seems to me that they're asking people to believe that the persecution of the saints stopped in 70 AD. My argument is that the persecution of the saints went far past 70 AD, and this is the reason why I'm talking about the Christian persecutions through 313 AD. And 313 AD, or 70 AD to 313 AD, we're talking about over 220 years. Well over that. So after the cross of the Mashiach, Christians endured various persecutions for almost 300 years across the Roman Empire. The persecutions varied and were not always of the same severity, but overall Christians were scorned. And by this time now, we know that these Christians were called believers of the Mashiach. These Christians were the saints. With the understanding now, again, dates are going to be very important because we know that during the time of the first century, the Talmudim, or the disciples of the Mashiach, were not calling themselves Christians. Okay, we know that this is a Greek word. This is a modern word. This was not a word that was commonly used amongst Hebrew followers. They were called Netzers. They were called those of the way. Anything but Christians. So I want everybody to know that I do understand that. Okay, but again, Christians were scorned. They were despised, principally because they would not honor or sacrifice to the Roman gods. Romans believed that if you sacrifice to the Roman gods, then those gods would be benevolent towards the empire. Sacrifice to the Roman gods would help ensure that harvest would be plentiful, the land would be prosperous, and good things would happen. So when there was bad weather, a poor harvest, a flood, or an earthquake, the Romans will blame the Christians, all right? Because you have to pay homage to the Roman gods. If the Christians had sacrificed to the Roman gods, they believed that these disasters would not happen. So it's pretty much the same thing that's going on today, all right? Anything that basically goes wrong in society today, you know what? It is because of those individuals who are calling themselves Yahudims today. They're the problem for everything. So nothing has changed other than we know who we are, all right? But our family members and friends who are also reading the same book can't understand that they are the people of the book and that they are imposters now living in Jerusalem, and those individuals can't stay there forever because that was the place where the Father placed his name, and some believe that the Father would never place his name there again. But we're going to look into the book of Romans, the 8th chapter now, to see whether or not that is true. So once again, so they believe if the Christians had sacrificed to the Roman gods, they believe that these disasters would not happen. So emperors were brutal to Christians. Now again, Nero is very important, but Nero was not that little horn. Nero thrust them into the arena with wild animals to be killed. He did do that, okay? Antiochus Epiphanes IV, he was, brutal, and he did kill a lot of Yahudims. I'm not arguing that. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But in regards to Nero, yes, he did burn a lot of believers of the Mashiach at the stake. However, now, around 110 AD, the Emperor Trajan was somewhat neutral, in regards to Christians, or believers of the Mashiach. His thinking was that you should not go asking around if someone is a Christian, nor should you go around making accusations. Despite this slight reprieve, Diocletian, who I talked about earlier, by 303 AD, despised Christians and severely persecuted them for 10 consecutive years. Diocletian, all right? Also, we have to understand the Battle of Milvian Bridge with Constantine and how now we have like a slight change in perspectives on how we are to now look at who? The Yahudims. All right, let's move on with history here. Let's move on. Like we had talked about earlier now, Constantine and the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. Again, we're going to be going through a lot of history today, and I believe that history is very important. And if you have a love for history the way that I do, the more you read, I guarantee you, it's going to bring these scriptures more into clarity, especially when you begin to look at those metals that are talked about in the book of Daniel, the 2nd chapter, and in Daniel, the 7th chapter, they're being mentioned as beasts. Watch this now. In 313 AD, the Edict of Milan, in reference to Constantine, it says, by the time of Constantine in 312 AD, things shifted dramatically in the favor of the believers of the Mashiach, or what we know to be as Christians. During this time, Rome was in a state of civil war. Constantine had a dream or a vision where he saw the sign of the cross in the sky and believed By that sign he would conquer. Constantine painted the first two Greek letters of the word for Christ, CHI and RHO, aka CR, on all of his soldiers' shields. He then went into battle against Maxentius at Milvian Bridge and came out the victor. He believed his victory was due to the Christian God, or the God of the Hebrews, the believers of the Mashiach. With his victory, Emperor Constantine gained a favorable attitude towards Christians. He issued the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. We have to understand now, what is the Edict of Milan? Because throughout history, you're going to see a whole lot of edicts, and you're going to see a lot of what they call, what's the other one? They're called edicts, and they're called, it'll come back to me. They're called edicts and papal bulls. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of that talked about also in the next coming lessons. He issued the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, which basically decreed that everyone should be benevolent to Christians. Christians would be free and open about their religious beliefs without persecution. Constantine also returned property that was previously confiscated from Christians. He wanted the state to prosper and felt that Christians would help advance his cause. So in order to have a successful, like I've been saying over and over again, in order to have a successful kingdom, you must have a military and you must have a religion. These two things are extremely important. So if you go about killing all of the Christians now, this is not going to look right morally now amongst the other nations. And so being that there was so many believers of the Mashiach, why not now try to work with these folks, bring the kingdom into some type of unison where we can actually even use the believers of the Mashiach now to our benefit, and they can actually now be part of the world society, and it can also be part of the military. So there's always a give and take with this whole thing here, but understanding the Edict of Milan is going to be extremely important as we continue on with the lesson. Now, Constantine did not necessarily have a conversion and accept the Mashiach as his sovereign and savior, because he still inscribed Sol Invictus on his coins, which means unconquerable or invincible sun, dedicated to the Roman sun god. And it is my understanding, I do have the book, and I'm going to be bringing out this book sometime in the future, where Constantine was actually studying and a believer of Mithra, okay, a Mithraism, which has nothing to do with believing in the Mashiach, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyway, Constantine, he still inscribed Sol Invictus on his coins, which means unconquerable or invincible sun, dedicated to the Roman sun god. However, he saw Christianity as a means to an end. He realized that Christians was a way to help unite the diverse cultures, language, and customs across the Roman Empire. Despite the vast diversities of people from Africans to Visigoths to the Greeks, Christianity could transcend all of them. Christians can be rich, poor, free, slave, barbarian, or Greek. It doesn't matter a person's background, language, or culture, all can be Christians. Constantine saw Christianity as the glue to hold the empire together. Now, Mishpachar, again, the history is very important. I would advise, because I've only screenshotted a couple of key points, but you have to understand what is Aryanism, Arianism, and how it relates to the 3rd and the early 4th centuries. Aryanism. About this time, a Christian priest named Arius had a different view on the nature or makeup of the Mashiach. Arius believed that the Mashiach was not of the same substance of God the Father, and that the Mashiach was a created being. He taught and spread this doctrine. This caused a great divide across the Roman Empire. And when the Bishop of Alexandria heard of it, he excommunicated, Arius from the church. Despite his excommunication, the teachings of Arius, later called Aryanism, continued to separate and divide the Christian church and the empire. Factions were appearing everywhere. Emperor Constantine was greatly alarmed because he wanted his empire to remain unified and strong. Arianism, if allowed to continue, will be a threat to the unity and existence of the empire itself. Watch how things get very, very interesting. Constantine was moved to call a church council to settle the matter once and for all. This would be called the Council of Nicaea that happened in 325 AD. And so it is very important for us to understand also how many councils were there, all right? There were around 7 councils, and these councils were centered around how we read Bible today. How do we read Bible today? So the Roman Catholic Church plays a major part in how we're reading Scripture. And Mishpachah, I'm going to share with you. You might be shocked by what you're believing and what you're reading. I would pray that everybody pays very close attention, and you have to do your research. Okay, my sister Sharon, okay, all right. Hallelujah. So, let's read on. Constantine was moved to call a church council to settle the matter once and for all. This would be called the Council of Nicaea that happened in 325 AD. And they wanted to see what's going on with this doctrine that was being pushed by Arius. It is now called Aryanism, on whether or not the Mashiach was a created being, okay, or whether or not, as some of us believe, he's always existed with the Father. So let's see what's going on here. At the conclusion of the council, they issued a doctrine that declared the Mashiach is of the same substance as God the Father. That is, Christ is of the same essence of God. Specifically, they use the term very God of very God. While they settled the matter officially, the matter was not settled for every individual. Aryanism will continue to proliferate as a belief throughout the empire. Over time, Christianity became more and more popular, but not always for pious and humble reasons. It was because Constantine was favoring the church and wanted it to flourish, and with it, the empire. Anyone who wanted to rise in prominence would join the church. He gave Christian priests equality with other priests. He exempted the church from taxes. He allowed individuals to give their property to the church. He made sure that Christians and church will fulfill their Christian duties. The Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD, you've been hearing me talk about that almost forever, all right? So the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD, by the late 4th century, events took a drastic turn, and Christianity was now the official religion of the Roman Empire, and that is so important. But there's so much to read on the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD. I would truly advise everyone, if you really want to know about Christianity and how the Roman Catholic Church, Constantine, Arius, how all of this plays such a major role, and what we believe, think today is going to have you question a whole lot. But again, the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 AD established and legalized Christianity as a single religion across the empire. Let's look at Emperor Theodosius. Emperor Theodosius recognized that Aryanism was still proliferating across the empire. Everyone had an opinion about the nature and substance of the Mashiach. Some believed that Mashiach was a created being, and others believed that he was of the same substance of the Father. He believed that this edict would settle the matter. Those who did not believe in the Trinity and one deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were considered heretics and would suffer punishment, severe punishment at that. So below is the edict issued by Emperors Gratian, Valentinian, and Theodosius. Emperors Gratian, Valentinian, and Theodosius Augusti, edict of the people of Constantinople. Listen to this. It is our desire that all the various nations which are subject to our clemency and moderation should continue to profess that religion which was delivered to the Romans by the divine apostle Peter. Peter was one of the 12. It has been preserved by faithful tradition, and which is now professed by the Pontifex Damascus by Peter, Bishop of Alexandria, a man of apostolic holiness, according to the apostolic teachings and the doctrine of the gospel. Let us believe in one deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which we know to be the Ruach HaKodesh, in equal majesty and in a holy Trinity. We authorize the followers of this law to assume the title of the Catholic Christians. Let me back up just in case you missed it. We authorize the followers of this law to assume the title of Catholic Christians. But as for the others, since in our judgment they are foolish madmen, we declare that they shall be branded with the ignominious name of heretics, and should not presume to give to their conventuals the name of churches. They will suffer in the first place the chastisement of the divine condemnation, and in the second the punishment of our authority, which in accordance with the will of heaven we would decide to inflict. Given in Thessalonica on the 3rd day from the calendars of March during the 5th, colonsate of Gratian Augustus and part of Theodosius Augustus. And you can find this, Mishpachar, in the Codex Thessalonicis 16, paragraphs 1 and 2. All right. So again, there's a whole lot that is going on. And I pray that if anybody was to ask you why you're taking the position that you're taking, all right, make sure you've done your due diligence with studying. You have to study. You have to read. Let's read on. Theodosian Law Code of 429 AD. On March the 26th, 429 AD, Emperor Theodosius II formed a committee to codify all the laws from the reign of Constantine the Great up to present time. This reason was that the laws were not uniform. There were redundancies, overlaps, and no single set of documents for easy reference. There was a large task that took 22 scholars 9 years to complete. All the laws were compiled into 16 books and covered political, 1, social, 2, cultural, and even religious topics. Excuse me. The law code included the impositions of orthodoxy within the Christian religion. There were 65 decrees directed at heretics because the Aryanism controversy was an ongoing affair. Excuse me. In today's modern and progressive age, to have a law code with religious penalties for heretics is very hard to imagine in today's times. But this is what they were doing. They had to put a stop to Aryanism. Had to. But can you imagine penalties being put into place if everyone did not conform to one particular religion? Well, Mishpachah, let me share this with you. Don't think this to be absurd, because what is happening now with the possibility, and I believe the great possibility of Donald Trump becoming the next president, Mishpachah, we are on the verge of something major happening. All right. I can't tell you what, but I do know this. The way that we know the world to be today, all right, 7 to 8 months from today, we're going to begin to see some drastic changes. Drastic changes, all right? And it has been argued that these drastic changes now began with Ronald Reagan. And so this 2025 agenda, okay, that's coming into play, Mishpachah, I believe it to be true. It said it's over 900 and some odd pages. I'm not suggesting that a person, read all 900 pages, but if you can, do that, do a little bit at a time. But understanding history and where this world is going is going to be a life changer. It's going to definitely be a life changer. So understanding history is very important for us to understand that history will repeat itself. And if we don't know what happened in the past, it's going to be very hard for us to prepare for the future. And so what I want everybody to be able to understand is it is very important that we prepare for the future. Let's read on. We're almost done too. Clovis in 508 AD. Clovis was the first king of the Franks. All right. And when we begin to talk about the king of the Franks, this is all tied into these invading tribes that invaded Rome. And just for sake of argument, let me just read those off to you again. Those 10 invading tribes were the Alemanni, which were the Germans, the Burgundians, which were the Swiss, the Franks, which were the French, the Lombards, which were the Italians, the Saxons, which were the English, the Suevi, which were the Portuguese, the Visigoths were the Spanish, and the three that were uprooted, okay, because of this whole thing with Aryanism and the Roman Catholic Church, who uprooted 3 of the 10. The 3 that were uprooted were the Hercules, they were extinct, the Ostrogoths, they became extinct, and the Vandals became extinct. So, once again, it is very important for us to be able to understand exactly what is happening in this world that we're living in, because if we don't stay abreast of what's going on, we're going to definitely miss the point. So let me just go ahead and finish up today's presentation. Now, once again, Clovis was the first king of the Franks. The Franks were one of the many barbaric tribes that migrated into Roman territory and later became a successor state. So once again, when I say the European Union, I am not saying that there was a such place called or group of nations called the European Union during 538, 536, or 538 or 540 AD, but those invading tribes became to what we know today as the European Union. And the European Union does not consist of just 10 nations, but the nation and that empire is still growing, but it had its roots amongst those barbaric tribes. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Clovis and his role a little later. However, that he was initially a pagan, but over time he became a Christian. He embraced the Catholic faith and was considered the founder of Roman Christianity and Germanic unity. The Frankish kingdom was the first to embrace Catholicism. Again, the Franks kingdom was the first to embrace Catholicism. It's important to note that the Franks were not nomads. They did not simply accept Catholic Christianity and isolate themselves. No. That's not what happened. They followed the political government system that was for the most part Roman. Clovis embraced the Thessalonian law code, and by doing so, recognized that heretics could not be tolerated. In time, Clovis would be influenced by the bishops to move against the Visigoths, who became extinct by the Roman Catholic Church, the Papacy, at that time, who were Arian Christians. Clovis did not attack the Visigoths for political reasons to gain their territory. He attacked them purely because they were Arian. Clovis defeated Alaric II in 508 AD, and in time, the Visigoths and Aryanisms would disappear. So that's 2 out of the 10, which only made now 1 more left. The Visigoths were the first horn or first kingdom to be removed. Once again, the Visigoths were the first horn or first kingdom was removed. The same religious intolerance would occur against the Vandals and the Visigoths in 538 and 538 respectively. The attack against these 2 kingdoms would lead by this general's name is very important. The attack against these 2 kingdoms would be led by General Belisarius from the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, not from the West, but from the Eastern Empire. And we know that Constantine moved his empire from Rome, Italy now to Istanbul, Turkey. And this is where we have the Eastern Empire. So this attack against these 2 kingdoms would be led by General Belisarius from the Eastern Roman Empire. Over time, both these kingdoms, along with the Arian beliefs, would end. With the removal of these 2 kingdoms, 2 more horns were uprooted. So let's see how that looks on this diagram that I have. And once again, I want to thank Angels in the Glen. I think he did an excellent job in a lot of his diagrams. And again, studying a lot of his work, studying a lot of the academia reports that I've been receiving, I'm really confident in believing, once again, that little horn is actually the papacy. Excuse me. So let's examine or summarize what we have here on this graph. Constantine the Great, okay, in the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312. The Edict of Milan happened in 313. In 321 now we have the Venerable Day of the Sun. In 325 we have the Council of Nicaea that we talked about. And we have now the Edict of Milan in 312 AD. Because Diocletian now, he was persecuting the Jews real heavy, and we have Maxentius, who was defeated now, and so now we have Constantine now attributing his victory to this vision that he saw, and so he wanted to pay his tribute to the Christian God by granting the Christians now a little bit more tolerance inside of Rome. And we already went over now the gold, the silver, the bronze, and what happened. We'll talk about a little bit later in 31 AD. We talked about the Edict of Thessalonica, Christianity and the official state religion took place in 380 AD. We talked about the Theodosian law code, the 65 decrees against heretics. We talked about Aryanism, started by a guy by the name of Arius. And that happened in 429 AD. And so, again, all of this is going to tie in helping us to understand who is the little horn power that dominated Europe as we know today and took the saints, which are the believers of Torah, the believers of the Mashiach, and held them captive for 1,263 literal years and not days. And then we talked about during the time of the iron mixed with clay. In 508 AD, there were religious wars, and there were 3 horns that was removed or uprooted. In 508, the Visigoths were uprooted. In 534, the Vandals were uprooted. And in 538 AD, the Ostrogoths were uprooted. So understanding, once again, this history, Mishpachah, is going to be very important. Now, given that brief historical backdrop, who is the little horn? What power after 476 AD that fits all the descriptions of Daniel, the 7th chapter? Who would intend to do this? What power existed for 1,260 years in Europe that persecuted the saints of the Father and would speak out against the Most High? Who is this? Who is this? Okay, we have another diagram here, all right, where we talked about, to the far left, times and a half of times. And this gives us now 1,260 literal years. Now, time is 360. Times is times 2, which gives you 720. And half a times would give you, let's do the math, 180. So you should have in total now 1,260 years. 1,260 years. But we have something called the church-state system. The church-state system is now what we call the papacy of the Middle Ages, or what they call the medieval ages. And from May the 7th, 538 AD, it talks about the third synod of the Orleans passes new laws, and then in February the 16th of 1798, the Roman church-state system ends in 1798. And this is the reason why I'm asking, if you were to look at dates and understanding 1776, and we're going to talk about this later, how important it is for us to understand now what government came up out of Rome, which is an extension of Rome. Who is this next government that came into power? And it is also talked about in the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 3. It is my argument is that, once again, America is the extension of Rome. So on May the 7th, 538 AD, at the third church Council of Orleans, the church system reestablished old church laws and passed new ones, and the year 538 AD will mark the beginning of the times, and half a times prophecy. The church-state system that developed and proceeded or prospered during the Middle Ages in Europe was the only power that historically matches all the descriptions of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Now let's evaluate the church-state system of the medieval ages and make sure that it matches all the criteria of Daniel, the 7th chapter. Let's talk about the little horn. A church-state system started out as a little power before Rome. That is very important. I should have had that in bold letters. The church-state system started out as a little power before Rome, transitioned to the successor states of Europe by 380 AD. Rome made Christianity its official religion, and we talked about that, okay, how this edict came into play in 380 AD. Over time, this power grew and dominated Europe, and we're going to talk about looking at some of these criteria in our next slide, slide number 7. After the political entity of the Western Roman Empire ended in 476 AD, the church bishops, okay, these Catholic priests, filled the power gap until the Frankish kingdom under Clovis united with the church in 508 AD. Okay, so let's look at some of these things here because we talked about the first one. Okay, let me just go back here. I want to make sure everybody's following along because we're almost done. Because what we're going to do now is look at some of the criteria that matches with Daniel the 7th chapter, and we made mention of the first one of the little horn. And I'm just going to read this real quick. In trying to make sure that we understand who the little horn is, and making sure that it matches with Daniel the 7th chapter, the little horn is a church-state system. Again, it's a church-state system, and it started out as a little power before Rome, and it transitioned to the successor states of Europe by 380 AD. Rome made Christianity its official religion. Over time, this power grew and dominated Europe, and we're going to see some more of this stuff as we go along. My second point is this little horn comes up from among the 10 horns. Once again, this little horn comes up from among the 10 horns. The church-state system must be a Roman power. Its origin is from the Roman head of the fourth beast, and it emerges among the successor states of Europe, meaning now the 10 horns. My third argument here now is making sure that everything is correct, and that this little horn, the papacy, fits all of the criteria that is mentioned in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. It makes mention now that 3 horns were uprooted by the papacy. The church-state system would destroy and eliminate the Aryan kingdoms of the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, beginning in 508 AD, 534 AD, and 538 AD, respectively. These powers were uprooted because of religious and not political differences, but religious differences. Aryanism, okay, is what we're talking about. It may mention that this little horn had eyes and a mouth. The church state would have eyes and a mouth showing intelligence. It would have a prominent man at its head, all right? And so, once again, the eyes and the mouth, now this is poetic language. So what this entity or this religious system was able to see and actually able to do is going to be very important because it had eyes and a mouth. It speaks out against the Most High. The church-state system would make many boastful claims of its authority on earth. It would claim to take the place of God, well, the Father, on earth. It arises to prominence after the fourth kingdom and after the 10 horns. Okay, the little horn arises to prominence after the fourth kingdom and after the 10 horns. The church-state system would not come to prominence until after Rome transitions into the European successor states. The earliest this could have happened would have been around 476 AD. It is different from the other horns and larger in appearance. This is very important. The little horn is different from the other horns and larger only in appearance. The claims of the church state systems were different than the other political systems that would claim religious authorities over the souls of men and over the European states. We're almost done, Mishpachah. 2 more slides. The Roman Catholic Church persecutes the saints. The church-state system abandoned the teachings of the Mashiach and persecuted the saints. It was the system that was corrupt from within. If the saints of the Father did not conform to the system's dogma, they were legally, watch this now, they were legally and religiously persecuted or excommunicated. And I'm going to show some things below. I think I have that diagram here. If I don't, I'll probably bring it up next week because of time. It intends to make alterations in times and laws. The church-state system, which is the papacy, when Belarius now, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later now, but the Franks now got sick and tired of what the papacy was doing. This is when we have now the demise or the downfall of the papacy, and what was only left now was a religious system which was called the Catholic Church. So let's read on. The church-state system will boast of its authority, even given so far as to modify divine laws. And I must have showed the modification of divine laws maybe about 100 times. So if you're not keeping up with the program, you're going to miss some very exciting papal bulls that was put together by these popes that actually changed, okay? It actually changed laws. Okay, the idea that the church would attempt to tamper with the laws of the Father or God is contrary to the teachings of the Mashiach. And you can look at Matthew the 5th chapter, 17 and 9. But we will discuss more of this in Daniel the 8th chapter and in the book of Revelation, the 13th chapter that I had made mention earlier. All right. But I have so much information. I have it in my head here. All right. But sometimes I have to do these PowerPoints here to even assure myself that I don't jump too far ahead with information. I want to make sure that I follow this timeline with this presentation that I have. So I'm not, jumping too far ahead, then going back and forth and back and forth. I want to make sure that that this presentation that I'm giving is following a pattern where nobody gets lost and everybody is able to understand exactly what direction we're going. The 10th claim that I have is that saints are given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time, using the day for your principle. This period translates to 1,260 literal years. The system will be in place from 538 AD until its demise during the French Revolution that happened in 1798 AD. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that in Daniel the 11th chapter and Revelation the 13th chapter. Let me just move this icon out of the way here because I want you guys to see this here. The little horn had extraordinary powers over the people of Europe throughout the Middle Ages. While this church-state system, and again, church-state system, at a time under the tutorship of the Franks, the papacy had a military. And if you did not abide by the papacy can use the military to excommunicate, to punish, to put to death those that oppose the rules and legislation of the Romans, or better yet, the papacy. Let's talk about that a little bit. While the church-state system helped maintain the integrity of the Bible over the centuries, the word of the Father was obscure from the people. Watch this. During this time, there was even a severe penalty if you were caught with the Bible. The only ones that was authorized to read and interpret the Bible was the papacy. Once again, it was a very severe crime, and at times it led to your death, even if you had a Bible. This is the type of control, the power that the papacy once had. And don't sleep on the Roman Catholic Church today. Don't sleep on them, all right? They're doing a whole lot of things behind the scenes, and we're going to continue to talk about that when we go into the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter. Okay, it created pomp and circumstances, rituals, and specialized ceremonies that replaced the simple teachings of the Bible as commanded by the Mashiach, or Jesus. The little horn maintained a strong grip on all parishioners and endorsed only one way to practice Christianity. That would be administered, maintained, and dogmatically enforced by the church-state system known as the papacy. Unfortunately, many saints who questioned the system or tried to obey the direct precepts of the Bible were treated as heretics. They were severely punished, tortured, or killed. We cannot know with certainty, but it has been estimated, watch this now, that over 100 million saints have lost their lives under the church-state system. My argument is the persecution of the believers of the Mashiach, of Torah. More people died under the papacy than the peoples that died during the 70 AD era. That's my argument. But if I'm led to believe that my investigation, me looking into Bible prophecy, should stop at 70 AD, I would never be able to come to this conclusion. I would advise, once again, everyone to understand Luis de Alcazar, a Jesuit priest who was hired by the papacy, that began this doctrine of 70 AD was the conclusion of everything. We have to study that. And if anybody was to ask me, yes, I do believe that a lot of Bible prophecies were fulfilled. But to say that every single last one of them, from Genesis to Revelation, have been fulfilled, no, I can't buy that. And let me just say this, for example. I like to watch a lot of like crime scene court shows. Have you ever seen a court show where a person who you know is guilty and they actually got away with the crime, but because of the evidence that was presented, and they had to go off of the evidence that was presented and judge accordingly to that. But deep down inside, you knew there was more evidence, but you didn't know where or how to present it. So being that you didn't know where the other information was, how to get it, or even how to present it to the court, the individual had to walk away free. And this is what I see now with the 70 AD doctrine. Meaning now is that I see where they're going, but with reading scripture and understanding this organized racism that is still going on amongst a certain group of people that still exists to this very day. Systematic racism still exists to this very day to try to eliminate a certain people. But if I'm told now to stop at 70 AD and now everything is okay, everybody gets a chance to go off into heaven somewhere, doesn't make sense to me. There are those that are holding our doctrine, Mishrakan, there is more to the story. Continue to read, study what is going on with the papacy, because this is not a mystery. The papacy itself, the Roman Catholic Church itself, will tell you that they have an extensive library buried underneath, or not even buried, but it's hidden underneath Rome. And you would have to meet certain credentials to go there and actually study those documents, but the literature is there. But it is not wide world known to the public. And this is the reason why, for me, I must continue to study. Because there is absolutely no way in the world, understanding systematic racism and how it works today, there is no way in the world that we could still be here without the divine intervening of the Father. Especially when you begin to look at the Tuskegee plan, where they were trying to now eliminate the so-called black community. And the list goes on and on. Okay, I'm not going to go into a rant with that, but let me go ahead and finish this here. We're at now, which slide? Okay, we're here. Let's start at the second paragraph. All right, let's speed it up here a little bit. It is important to understand that the church system, state system, compromised the clear teachings of the Bible. The saints were in the system, and okay, we already read that, right? We already read that. So, okay, let's go down to the next presentation. I think this is the last one, too. Yeah, this is the last one. Because the Bible is clear. The great struggle of the ages is not a battle against atheism and unbelief. That only increases the faith of believers. Rather, the great apostasy is from within. Satan's great triumph is the corruption of Christianity. And I pray that everybody is able to see that. The devil has hoodwinked the Christian world. The Antichrist has already come as a historical power in Christian Europe. With a starting point of 538 AD, the times, and half the times of prophecy, the 1,200 literal years, would conclude in 1798. This was a tumultuous time, a time of upheaval and revolution. Indeed, this was a time of the French Revolution. Many historians consider the French Revolution as the single most influential event in all Western history. The reason is that it transformed society and brought us into the modern era. It brought down kings and queens, the privileges associated with monarchy, aristocracy, and the clergy ended. Equality and liberty for all men was the new ideal of the day. In 1798, the French Revolution brought down the church-state system. The little horn power that took the Father's people captives was itself taken captive. And this is where listen, just follow the trail. Watch what happened. In 1798 AD, the Vatican was stormed and overtaken by Louis Alexandria Berthier. Again, that name is going to be very important. In 1798, the Vatican was stormed and overtaken by Louis Alexander Berthier, a general of Napoleon. He took Pope Pius VI captive as a prisoner and gave Italy her freedom. This was the decisive death blow to the church-state system, the papacy. The head of the church was removed, as was its authority across Europe. Furthermore, because of the French Revolution and Napoleon's ambition, Francis II, okay, the last emperor of the the last emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, dissolved the empire in 1806. Francis II decreed that Napoleon would annex the emperor title. This is how Australia was established. All right. So, Mishpachah, I want to thank everybody for taking time again out of your busy schedule to join your brother here, Kasada Bar. All right, it's been a pleasure going over the scripts here with you this morning. I pray that the Father continue to bless you, to keep you safe and sound, and that the Father continue to be with you, Mishpachah. All right. Let's see here. Yes, I pray that the Father continue to be with you and keep you safe and sound, Mishpachah, for all your time and cooperation. And we're going to do this again next week. All right, we won't have that long delay. And I pray once again for your peace and your blessings. And with that, Mishpachah, I'm going to say shalom, shalom.